Hello to my Law and Society class and welcome to week 4 of summer session 2020. We are now going into the second half and we have 3 more weeks together before this particular course is over. It flies by and we get a lot of work done in a short amount of time. So one of the things that's going to happen this Tuesday, today, is that you're going to get your first exam. And your first exam is going to cover the introduction that I did the first week, the physician aid in dying, and the abortion issue. Those issues and the introduction will be on this first exam. Let me just address how you should approach this exam. So the exam itself is an essay exam. And I believe there are 10 essays on the exam, all worth 10 points. And I want to explain, for those of you who have not had me in a class before, what an essay exam is. I am looking for you to read what I am asking and completely and thoroughly and fully answer it with detail, using legal terminology and definitions, and being certain that you fully explain and fully answer whatever is asked. Now, generally speaking, when someone asks me, well, how long should each essay be? It's more about the content, but I say, some people will write me a lot more than others, but an essay question is at least a paragraph, and for some it's more. Now, you're going to have the luxury of being able to use your textbook, my lecture notes that I have sent, my introduction notes, so there's no excuse that every student shouldn't be able to get an A on this exam if they take their time, if they write complete essay answers with details and definitions, and get a good grade. Remember, you've had little assignments along the way. Those assignments are going to be put together at the end of this session, and they will make up one test grade. This exam I'm sending you will be your midterm. That's going to be a second test grade, and the last week you will have a final exam, and that will be a third test grade. So you will have 3 grades that I will average in for your final grade in this summer session. Now, usually, if this were face-to-face, and this was during the regular semesters, this class, Law and Society, does a paper, but because of the shortened time limit and because of everything going online, sometimes for the first time for some of you, then there was no paper required. But those will be the 3 grades you have that will determine what your final grade is. I hope that you have found the issues we've been doing so far, the physician aid in dying, the differences between civil and criminal, what appellate courts do, and the abortion issue, and the issue of things like slippery slope and undue burden. I want to remind you that the slippery slope doctrine and the undue burden doctrine or rule, those are not just used in the issues that we have been studying, like physician-assisted suicide or abortion. Those terms are used for many different issues depending on where the circumstance fit them. So if you're asked about those, remember that I'm asking about what they are, and then might be asking, depending on the question, for you to then relate them to a particular issue that we have studied. So please take your time with your exam, write full essay answers. Don't just write from memory. Make sure you check in your text, make sure you check in my lecture notes. You want to get a high grade, and this is an opportunity to do it with the material that we have studied. Then on Thursday, you're going to get an assignment, to read our next issue. Our next issue is going to be on the death penalty. Our next issue falls in the book under 3.5, under law and the state, and the question it asks, does the cruel and unusual punishment clause in the 8th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution bar, meaning prevent, the imposition of the death penalty on juveniles. So like every other issue that we are studying this semester, I want you to know that the issue presented in the book is where we start. That's going to be sort of the jump off. So although this is asking about whether juveniles in the United States can receive the death penalty, we're going to talk about the history of the death penalty. And I always say the framers of the Constitution who wrote the 8th Amendment were not against the death penalty. How do we know that? Because after the 8th Amendment was ratified in 1791, and if you don't know, the 8th Amendment says that it is against cruel and unusual punishment. So the 8th Amendment was ratified, became part of the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, but we still had the death penalty. And we had the death penalty throughout our entire history of this country, except for a few years in the early 19 to mid 1970s, which you'll get in my lecture notes and you'll see in the issue itself. Many people to this day and throughout our history believe that the death penalty is cruel and unusual punishment. And certainly one of the interesting things about the death penalty in the United States today is which countries in the world, of all the countries in the world, still use the death penalty and who uses it the most. And I want to read you an excerpt from the book, and it says, "The United States is not alone in the world in employing capital punishment, but it does have some curious bedfellows. In 2012, the United States executed the 5th most people in the world. Who was ahead of us? China, Iran, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia. Then us, then Yemen and Sudan." And so the United States is in a group that uses the death penalty, and the rest of that group, in many instances in this country, we have considered that those particular countries do not give and enforce and think as important civil and moral rights to their citizens. And there we are, right there in smack in the middle with them. In fact, those other countries, most of them were the subject matter of President Trump's travel ban originally when he first came to power after his inauguration. And so countries that we look at and think are less civilized are exactly where we are today in their company when it comes to the death penalty. But we're going to use the death penalty as a means of talking about the history of it, when and why the U.S. Supreme Court for a brief period of time did away with it, and also we're going to talk about it as to juveniles. We're going to talk about it as to people who are considered mentally retarded and what that means. And we are also going to look at the death penalty and also life without the possibility of parole and how that has been decided by the United States Supreme Court. So whether you are in favor of the death penalty or you are against it, this is an issue that throughout our entire history of this country, from the time that the Constitution was originally ratified in 1789, we have been debating over this issue. And one of the side tangent issues that we are seeing today is that there are people on death row who it's difficult for the United States government to actually get the drugs that are used in lethal injection. First of all, we were buying them for a while. Well, first of all, U.S. companies no longer want to produce them because they don't want to be known as the company, the pharmaceutical company that produces lethal injection. But so many of them backed off producing it. So then the United States began buying them in Europe until the Europeans discovered why we were buying those drugs. They use those same drugs on animals, to euthanize animals. And we were buying them from Europe and using them for people in the United States who had been sentenced to capital punishment by lethal injection. And so now the supply of these lethal injection drugs are starting to get more and more difficult to obtain around the world. I also want to point out to you that probably in September, one of the things I'm going to start requiring for this course, I'm not right now, but I would encourage you to see the movie Just Mercy. The book Just Mercy, written by Brian Stevenson, was written in 2014, and it is nonfiction, and it talks about mostly, and especially with George Floyd and with the issues we are seeing across the country, it talks about those people, mostly minorities, mostly men, mostly uneducated and poor, who have been found guilty of crimes and later, usually through DNA, proven that they were completely innocent. These are people who some have gotten the death penalty, some have been in prison on death row for decades, others have been sentenced to life in prison, and later on someone working on their case is able to prove that it absolutely 100% was not this person. And so we're going to talk about that also, but that movie, if you've read the book, great, but the movie is out, and it's been out for about a year now, and it is compelling. It doesn't tell you each and every case that, of course, you can read about in the book, but it shows you the type of persistent, systematic racism that has infiltrated the criminal justice system forever. And the statistics, if you are male, if you are uneducated, if you are a minority, if you live in poverty, you are much more likely to face the death penalty than a woman, than a person who is white, than a person who is educated or has money. And as we're seeing in the criminal justice system, from the police officer on the street, not all police officers, right through to trial, not all judges and juries, but there is in the system racism that has been perpetuated for centuries, which hopefully now with all that is going on, including the book and the movie Just Mercy, we will begin to look at how we deal with those less fortunate who are coming into the criminal justice system. And so, we're going to read this on the death penalty, but we are going to relate it to all of those other issues that are connected to that. And this is really the place where we can think of the George Floyds and the other types of the Trayvon Martins, the way that we have treated minorities in the criminal justice system throughout our history, and maybe begin to make us think, what change can we make? What change can we be a part of and insist upon so that due process and fairness and justice are carried out in our courtrooms and on our streets every single day? Okay, so you don't have to worry about reading the death penalty case until Thursday. On Tuesday, you're going to get your first exam. Please take your time, fully answer. You want to get a great grade. And then Thursday, I will send your assignment to read the issue on the death penalty. Okay. I'm looking forward to week 4. I'm looking forward to seeing the things that you will be writing on your exam, and also for us to be able to discuss and learn about the death penalty itself. You know, taking it further than just, oh, are you for it or are you against it? Okay, have a great week 4. We only have 3 weeks left to this semester. It's going by quickly. We are keeping right on track with the work that we are supposed to cover. Have a wonderful week. Good night.